Hey there, guys. I'm on my backup computer. My main computer is doing an update and it's been taking forever. I have a feeling it's updating something to do with the coronavirus. By the way, how many people have heard a rumor that supposedly your cell phone has a coronavirus tracking app that got automatically installed on it? Did anybody hear something like that? Up in my chat window, you did. So did you, Nicole, did you try, and Franklin, did you guys try and go verify that? Did you go look on your phone to see if you could actually find if something was installed or not?
No, I kept it turned off. I haven't turned it on.
So what I did a little bit of research and I looked on I have an Android phone and I looked on my Android phone and it is, well, something was installed, not an actual application. The way they described it was that a framework was installed, and both Apple and Android did this, and they put out there's a press release that was put out on May 30th by both of them that said they would be updating the OS to allow an application to be downloaded and use this framework. So much like the .NET framework that a lot of programs use on a Windows machine that you download so those programs can use that framework to perform common tasks, that's kind of what both Android and Apple downloaded. So you can go into your settings and you can actually see this COVID-19 notification thing. So everybody should probably go check that just to see if it's on their phone, and it might surprise you. Now, again, I did some research. It's not the actual application, as you were saying there, Franklin. You have to actually enable it, turn it on, and then you actually have to go down and load a tracking app and turn your Bluetooth on. And conspiracy theorists would have you say, well, the government's trying to track you or whatever, and they did it without your permission, but you actually still have to further install something. I'm going to open my blinds so I have a little more light. If I turn this light on up here, it shines too much in the camera. Actually, I tell you what, I'll just sit down and I'll move some things around. But now if you install the app and you enable your Bluetooth, do you guys know what it does, by the way? And why you would want to possibly install this app? Did you do much research on it, Franklin? I'm gonna connect my external monitor here while you guys type or say something. What it's supposed to do is when you are within Bluetooth range of somebody who has been reported, I believe the reporting is by volunteer. Oh, I don't see my monitor anymore. Are you guys still there? Hang on. There we go. So I believe it's by volunteer basis that if you have been exposed to COVID-19, you tell the app that you have been exposed to COVID-19 and you turn it on so that if anybody else has the app, gets within 30 feet of you or Bluetooth range, a warning will pop up on your phone. Warning, there's somebody within 30 feet of you that has potentially been exposed to COVID-19. Now, this is a mandatory thing that they're doing in China. It's not mandatory here because we don't live in that kind of a society. But what do you guys think of that? Oh, here, my other computer finally came back up. Let me see if I'd rather switch over to this other computer, but what do you guys think of that?
I mean, from the outside, the intentions sound good, but I don't know. I'm always worried about what that'll push next as far as, okay, well, volunteer for this and let's volunteer for other things.
Say that again, Franklin.
One second, I have a lot of noise in the back.
Oh,
Hold
who
on.
else is? Oh, that's okay. Was that you talking?
Okay, yeah, I said, yeah, I mean, I think the intention is overall, I guess, kind of good, but I don't know if by doing that, then that we kind of open up Pandora box to further things.
Yeah, that's a good word, the Pandora box. What a lot of people argue, let me open this here. What a lot of people argue is that if you start allowing third-party organizations to, or even the manufacturers of the OS to make available these sort of hooks into the operating system to do background tracking, that it's a potential pathway towards abuse. And it's other words I hear being used are slippery slope. You know, even though the intention is good, and that's usually where a lot of these things are born, at least in this country and even in China, the intentions are good. The intentions are they want to try to stop the spread of COVID-19. And it has other far-reaching benefits if it's used properly and appropriately. But as you know, things can, you know, it's a tool, just like I said before, chainsaw. A chainsaw is a very powerful tool, and it can be used for good things, or it can be used by bad people for bad things. So whenever you have available a tool that powerful, there either needs to be some regulation, or maybe if the tool is just so dangerous, maybe it just shouldn't be available at all. So a lot of people are not happy about that. But if this were a perfect world, I think it would be great if we had something like that. If this was a perfect world, I'd be all, or close to a perfect world, I'd be fine for sharing where I am all the time, and not necessarily sharing what I'm doing, but being able to be communicated with at all times, because it just makes the convenience is there. So in terms of using the internet, and that's what we're going to start talking about today. Okay, my computer's updated. So I may switch over to this other computer in the middle of talking to you. But in terms of using the internet, the original concept for, and the reason we developed the internet and started using it was for altruistic, well, I don't know if it's altruistic. We started the internet because of a response to an act of perceived aggression. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? If you know anything about the internet.
Cold War?
The internet was started back in the late 50s, early 60s. It's been around a long, long time. It wasn't called the internet back then. Gosh, this is slow. But it was, here we go. One more. It was, yeah, Cold War. More specifically, Franklin, Cold War. There is one, if I were to ask this question on the test, what is the one deciding, or the one event that really sparked the beginning of the internet, and that was Sputnik. So go look up Sputnik for a minute while I switch over to my other computer. If you don't know what it is, Sputnik. Did I spell that? No, Sputnik. I spelled it wrong. And there's numerous videos and information that you can read on Sputnik and what Sputnik was. Okay, I'm on my other computer here. Hang on one second, I'll get rid of that.
I'll just go ahead and continue recording it on this computer. Ooh, fun. volume all the way down. Okay, is there any echo now? Okay, good, the echo's gone. Can you guys hear me on the other computer now? Okay, I might just look weird, so let me fix that real quick, and then I guess I'll mute the video on this one. You don't need to see my video. So you're looking up Sputnik. I'm looking for the background. Where's the background thing? Oh, there it is. Oh, good. I feel much better. I was feeling weird there for a minute. Okay, so Sputnik started the internet, and that was very briefly, for those of you that didn't bother to look it up, or you need to hear it here on the video, Sputnik was a Russian satellite. It couldn't do very much. It was basically a radio beacon. It just went beep, 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 and that's all it did. Couldn't really even retransmit a signal. It just transmitted a signal. It was launched in 1957 by the Russians. We were engaged in what's called a Cold War at the time, because after World War II, Russia started eating up property, and the United States still owned certain property and land in Europe, or still controlled it. And there was a battle over who controlled what between Russia and the United States. And it all culminated, by the way, when we discovered missiles based in Cuba, and that freaked us out, and that's where all that Cuban Missile Crisis came about. That was later in the 60s, but so that really scared America, and they said, look, we've got to get our best and brightest scientists together, communicating with each other, and our military people communicating, so that we can basically develop the same technology, or figured out how they did that, so that we can, it was really just about flexing our muscles and showing Russia, you know, we can do what you can do, or we can do better than that. Or if it turns out that you start putting up nuclear missiles in space, that we can also put up nuclear missiles in space and shoot your nuclear missiles down before they land on Washington and LA and Houston or whatever. So that's where that came about. The internet was created so that we did not have to put all those scientists together from all the different universities, all the different military installations. That wasn't feasible to do. It wasn't safe to do either, because if the Russians did find out, let's pretend that the Russians did have intentions here. Let me take these off. Let's pretend the Russians did have intentions of attacking America. And so one of the targets would be, let's target the Pentagon, for example, assuming that that's where all the scientists were. I try to figure out where are all these scientists that are trying to dream up all these things that they're going to shoot our things down. So keeping all of the people participating on the internet away from each other, kind of like how we're doing with the COVID-19 thing, was a smart thing, but we needed to figure out a way to allow them to communicate their ideas and their thoughts and their experiments and their notes. So the first real use of the internet was file transferring, and later on email. So email and file transfer has been around a long, long time. That's why the port number for file transfer protocol, excuse me, sorry, FTP is a very low port number. That's a layer 4 port, or a layer 4 address. I'll open up a Word document if you want. But a layer 4 address is a port number from 1 to 65535. 21 is for file transfer. If you were to be using a file transfer program, sorry, I gotta put my glasses back on to see this, such as I use one called WinSCP, which is very much like PuTTY, by the way, if anybody's played with PuTTY. I may not have it on this computer, but let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the, let me move the monitor to the new computer. WinSCP, it's an application that uses FTP, and it's only used for file transfer from one computer to another. It's much faster to use this kind of file transfer method than it is to use the web, the internet, or HTTP for transfer. That's actually a pretty slow way to do it. So share screen number 2. There we go. Now I can share a screen. Was that a sneeze, Tina? If it was, gesundheit, or bless you, or whatever you're supposed to say. Trying to bring up WinSCP. And by the way, I'm going to change that assignment that I have, because the Wireshark assignment, it's not very easy to do and not very wieldy anymore. And given that you guys are not doing it in the lab anymore, there's WinSCP, what it looks like when you open it up. And you can see I've pre-saved a few different things that I log into here. So if I needed to log into, gosh, I haven't logged into many of these things in a long time. If I needed to log into something, I could log in, and it would look basically like the file manager of Windows, the file manager of the Mac. It shows you a side-by-side view. Let's see if I can get on this one. What's wrong with my mouse? I mean, my keyboard. Having some tech issues with it today. Well, I'll show, here's what we'll do. Just keep in mind, FTP, file transfer, port 21. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add an assignment. It'll be not a hard assignment at all, which you will employ and use an FTP program. There's several that you can use. WinSCP is one of them. FileZilla is another one. And FileZilla actually, and there is within the Wireshark consolidated assignment, it suggests that you use FileZilla to do a file transfer from one computer to another, from your local computer to a server somewhere. But FileZilla was recently found to have some potential spyware in it. I think they updated it, but I don't like FileZilla. I like WinSCP. And so I recommend that you go ahead and download and install WinSCP pretty soon here, maybe even today. It's a fairly simple download, as long as you have a computer that you can download and install things to. If you don't, you'll have to use the virtual machine in the lab, and if you're not able to get to it virtually, we're gonna have to figure out something else for you. So that's where our internet started. Let me go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint presentation so I can continue talking. I don't want to have a long class today. I started a little bit late, somewhat on purpose. Still getting to all your grading stuff. I bet these updates that our computers are doing also has something to do with COVID-19, which is annoying. but COVID-19 is annoying. So chapter 10, the internet. There's a little bit of history to this chapter, and since I'm old, I know a lot of history. I guess I'm not really that old, not compared to all the other props in MIS department, but I guess I should say I've experienced this for a long time. It's been really fun growing up in the era that I grew up in, where I saw the advent of the first PCs and the first game consoles that kids had at home to where we are today. So it's really been very interesting growing up in this age. You guys have all pretty much grown up in an age where you've always had, or your parents or somebody has always had a computer or a cell phone, something either at your home, or you've had access to it either at the library, or your parents have had access to it at their place of business. So let's see. The internet, just the history of the internet, I already talked a little bit about that. But this chapter doesn't talk a lot about the history. We already talked some about the history of the internet, but just keep in mind that the World Wide Web, the things that you guys know best, World Wide Web, it hasn't been around that long. It's only been around since about 1990. We also call that, this is a term that Al Gore coined, the information superhighway. You guys remember Vice President Al Gore? I believe he was under, was he Clinton's vice president, Clinton Gore? He helped to make possible funding. The federal government put $4 billion into helping to develop the World Wide Web. So anyway, the internet started as a government project called DARPANET when the Department of Defense finally beat Russia in the space race by basically putting a man on the moon in 1969, which had nothing to do, of course, with thank you, Clinton, which had nothing to do with, it's not like we have missiles on the moon, not that we know of. By the way, there's a really funny series on Netflix which has to do with this called Space Force. I highly recommend watching that, not necessarily for this learning in this class, but it's interesting and amusing and speaks to current events and speaks to this Space Force that President Trump did start, and it's a real thing. And, he wants to put quote unquote boots on the moon by 2024. So the government oftentimes starts out funding a lot of these things, and then they step away. And that's where the internet is now. The government, although they do participate as a user on the internet, they don't control it. And the governments of some countries try to control the content, but they don't really control the mechanism and the actual physical highways of the internet. That's all private industry, excuse me, citizens, people that want to belong to the internet, who just agree to connect their computers together, or their networks together, I should say. So the internet is the most used network in the world. There are other networks that are not the internet. Some of you might remember some of them. Anybody ever heard of AOL? Open up WordPad here. AOL, or America Online, that was kind of like a precursor to the internet. Yeah, and for some people, that was their first experience. There was one even before that. AOL, what they did was they would send you a DVD or a CD. It got really silly to the point to where we were hanging AOL CDs on Christmas trees as gifts and things. Yeah, you got me. Before that, there was US Videotel. And there was a bunch of smaller companies that had proprietary services that you logged into with a phone line and a modem. Nowadays, people don't use phone lines for the most part. There might be still some phone line usage, some analog phone line usage and modems, but Most people have dedicated connections. Even your cell phone is a dedicated connection. It is connected all of the time, unless you're out of cellular range. It's connected to a cellular network all the time, whether you're making phone calls or not. That's considered a dedicated connection. You can't switch off of Sprint to Verizon to AT&T at your discretion. You have to go sign a contract and sign up. So these days, because everybody's pretty much dedicated, it killed all of these other companies, which we used to call ISPs, which stands for Internet Service Providers. Now, Internet Service Providers still exist, but there's not nearly as many of them. In Houston alone, back in the early 90s, there was probably 500 Internet Service Providers. Now there's maybe 10. And that's because there's not a lot of companies that can provide the dedicated internet access infrastructure. So the internet is the global network. There's also a thing called the darknet. Darknet, which it actually is on the internet, but it's hidden content is basically what it is. And then the military has their own version called the MILNet, the US military does, and other countries have their versions of public networks as well. North Korea, did you guys hear recently, I think it was maybe 6 or 8 months ago, North Korea's version of the internet, which of course North Korea is a very closed society. They control their citizens very much. It was exposed temporarily to the real internet. And somebody determined that North Korea had like 30 websites, and it looked like websites from 20 years ago, and they were very much in the past, which of course makes sense for somebody like, for a country like that. So not all countries participate in the internet because either they're not allowed to, or they just don't choose to, like Somalia, for example. Certain countries, most of which, there's only about 3 or 4 that are on the list of countries that we're not allowed to do business with because they support terrorism or don't do anything about it. So for the internet to work, and this is the important point here, organizations have to use standardized protocols so that they can communicate with each other. So if I want to send email from my network to your network, we have to agree on some sort of a standardized protocol, and that's where those port numbers come in. So FTP was port number 21. As long as you follow the FTP protocol, which is an application layer protocol, you could send and receive files to my servers and vice versa. Same thing with mail, email. SMTP was the first email protocol that works on port 25. These are very, very low numbers, so that should tell you these have been around for a long time. Web traffic is port 80, so it's a much higher number. That protocol wasn't developed till many years later. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that the World Wide Web didn't come about till 20 years after the internet. There are few controls over the content and the applications in most countries over the internet, even if there are laws that prevent certain, that not prevent, but punitively punish you if you do things that you're not supposed to do on the internet. It doesn't really, a lot of times you cannot prosecute or you can't convict people that break the law. For example, you guys probably know that you can go to online gambling sites and you can gamble all you want on the internet. It's illegal for a company unless they're in certain areas. Like if I'm in Las Vegas, I can have an online gambling site as long as that site doesn't exist beyond the boundaries of my casino or the state of Nevada. It's very difficult to keep that from happening because if it's on the internet, it's accessible potentially by anybody. There's a lot of gambling sites that you can go to and put in a credit card and gamble and lose your money. They're all offshore. They're all existing in other countries, which it's not illegal or they don't care. That's where most of them are. So they can get around a lot of our local laws. Most of the travel agency brokers like Priceline and Travelocity and all of those are all offshore too. And they do that on purpose to keep themselves from being sued Anybody ever used any of those, Priceline.com or Travelocity or Orbitz or any of those, to get a deal at a hotel, and you go there and the deal is not the deal you thought you were getting? So you try to sue the Priceline or whoever, and they say, well, sorry, you can't sue us because you agreed that you wouldn't, and besides, we're in Tahiti, so screw you. So it's difficult to do that. So like I said before, internet providers used to be telephone modem service providers when service was selective, non-dedicated, switched, in other words, and the end user could switch it. These days, it's all about dedicated services. So we have tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 providers that exist. And these are terms that we use in the industry. There are also some other providers that we call tier 0 and tier Z and different things like that. But these are the 3 general tiers. National providers, and some of these companies you've probably never heard of, like Level 3 or Akamai. Some of them you have heard of, like AT&T, because AT&T is a tier 1, tier 2, and a tier 3 provider. They have a vertical market, or they have a vertical model, I should say, where they provide services to other internet service providers and end users as well. But there are some providers that only exist in this tier that you as an end user, a small mom and pop company or a home, would never communicate with, because their minimum bandwidth might be something like 500 megabits per second and a certain minimum number of bits per month. That's how they charge typically the lower tier providers that they connect to. They have big fiber networks that go across entire regions, like entire countries, and they come together in certain areas called inter-exchange points, or IXPs. So tier 1 providers, I'll give you a better list a little bit later on. Tier 3 providers provide services typically in a local region, like Houston. Phonoscope is one. InTouch, ENTOUCH, FrontierNet. These are providers. Cox Cable. They provide services, and Comcast too, Xfinity as well. They are a tier 3 provider. They only provide services in a few cities in the country. A lot of us are familiar with Xfinity because we're in Houston. It's one of their largest markets. But if you were to go to Dallas, they don't have Xfinity there. They have Time Warner up there and Cox, and they have other cable providers that provide modem services too. So inter-exchange points, and first of all, keep this in mind, the way that these providers make their money, tier 1 providers don't collect money from end users at all. They collect money from regional providers that are providing services maybe to just one state, or the Gulf Coast region, for example, like Level 3, for example, or CenturyTel. And then those tier 2 providers provide services to local carriers, which might only provide services to a certain type of business, like only to hospitals or only to certain neighborhoods, like Del Webb Sweetgrass. Whoops, I hit that thing. Anybody ever heard of that neighborhood, the Sweetgrass neighborhoods by Del Webb? They're basically retirement community neighborhoods. You have to be over 50 to live there, or over 55, I think. Yeah, I can live there now with my dad. So they're putting these neighborhoods up everywhere, and they're tailoring the amenities in these neighborhoods towards retired people. And they have an internet service provider that provides fiber optic cabling and fiber optic internet service to their various communities. In Richmond, Texas, there's one happens to be AT&T, but they usually sign a contract with somebody in those areas. If anybody is in Sienna Plantation, I used to live out there, they have InTouch systems, which is, if you look them up, they get 1 out of 5 stars in terms of internet service. I lived in Sienna Plantation for 2 years. I had InTouch. They were a terrible internet provider. But back in 2000, we didn't have that many choices. So inter-exchange points, let me talk about that for a minute. This is kind of like a main distribution facility, an inter-exchange point, but it's at a much greater scope, or much larger scope. I'm going to skip that for a minute. Here is a not that accurate of a map. It's a slightly older map of major inter-exchange points within North America. Now, what do you see that seems to be blatantly missing off this map? First of all, that's supposed to be the Dallas-Fort Worth area up there. But Houston, we have the largest population in Texas. We're the fourth, possibly the third largest city in the country. Why do you think that we are not in inter-exchange points where multiple carriers would come together? What an IXP is basically like a co-location facility where carriers agree to rent one part of a building. They usually go to a third party and say, we need to rent this building. I'm going to take any traffic off of my network, which is intended for networks and IP addresses on your network, and I'll pass it over to you, and we'll do something called peering. We won't charge each other for the connection. I'll hand you a cable, you hand me a cable, and we'll connect our two networks together for the good of mankind. Okay, or just, it just makes us, it just gives us value, adds value. We don't want to close our network off. So why is there not one in Houston on this major map? Weather, that's one thought. That's actually a pretty good thought. Weather. We have, as most of you know, shitty weather here a lot, as is today and yesterday. What are some other reasons why we don't have a major inter-exchange point here? Take some guesses. Take a look at geographically. Oops, I'm sorry, I keep hitting that. Dallas is, would you agree that Dallas is more central to the United States than Houston is? Although we are horizontally in the center of the United States, we're right on the coast. There's nobody in the Gulf of Mexico, or no major areas in the Gulf of Mexico that we need to provide internet services to. Yeah, there's some boats and some islands and things out there, but they have satellite internet. So it's not really appropriate to have a major inter-exchange point in Houston. This map lists basically the official inter-exchange points that were developed or suggested basically a long time ago. You can go Google for an IXP map, maybe a more accurate one. And that does not mean, by the way, that does not mean that there are not smaller inter-exchange points within North America, including within Houston. And there are also global inter-exchange points. Maybe I should have typed in North America IXP or USA. Let me do that. See if we can find some inter-exchange points within the United States. Yeah, that's kind of basically the same one there. But you see, again, Dallas is kind of the major deal. Here's some other reasons why, by the way, that it's in Dallas. It's more centralized. What do you mean by regulation, by the way, Franklin? You think Dallas has allowed different regulations than Houston?
Yeah, it was just a guess. I really.
Oh, it's a guess, but no. Usually, regulations based on communication is usually statewide or federal, not local. Local governments can't usually regulate radio waves and communication. That's not really their job. But Dallas has cheaper electricity than we do. Our electricity costs more to generate here. We are closer to the coastline, so we are more susceptible to floods and hurricanes. And actually, you want to put an inter-exchange point in a less populated area physically, not a heavily populated area. You want to put it out of town somewhere, so it's obscure and people can't find it, because inter-exchange points are major targets. If I want to take the internet out, I can blow up the 15 or 20 largest internet inter-exchange points in the country and take the internet down. And arguably taking the internet down for any period of time is a major catastrophe. And you guys all believe that when you lose the internet all day or power all day, it's a pretty major catastrophe. You can't get anything done. Might as well just go outside and read a book if you have a book to read. Can't go to the bars right now, I guess, not without wearing a mask. So now, like I said, some tier 1 providers and more often tier 2 and tier 3 providers do come together in co-location facilities. And I have a co-location facility that I use on West Park in Southwest Houston, and there's 2 separate areas of it. I took some pictures. I thought I'd uploaded those, but I'll re-upload those. There's a separate cage of just telecommunication racks, and telco racks look different than server racks. Telco racks are 2-post racks and have a bunch of routers and switches in them. Server racks are what companies use to host websites. They're 4-post big cabinets. It's a separate section. They come together there. So let me go back to this for a minute. ISPs, internet service providers of any size, are autonomous, meaning those IP addresses that they give you temporarily, usually through DHCP, they have been pre-assigned to the ISP. An ISP can apply for and receive what's called an ASN, an Autonomous System Number. If you are a large enough entity like the University of Houston, you can also apply for an ASN number block. So everything at U of H is 129.7.everything.everything. We applied a long time ago. We're one of the first nodes on the internet, maybe like node 20, I'm guessing, not very much further behind Rice University and UT. So what that means for us as a university is we can go to any internet provider who has a physical connection in the area, say we want to connect through you, but you're not going to give us internet numbers. We're going to tell you what our internet range is, and you're going to broadcast and propagate that throughout the internet. To do that, we use special protocols, routing protocols like BGP. You don't need to know what that stands for. It stands for Border Gateway Protocol, but just keep in mind that autonomous network numbers, and we have a class B, for example, they usually have to be pretty big, like 5 times of a class C or larger. And you have to justify that. If you go to apply for an autonomous system number block, you have to go to ARIN.net or the registrars, not the name registrars, it's actually number registrars you go to. It used to be ARIN.net that you would go to. Now it's been split up not too long ago between different registrars in the world, and say, hey, I'm the new, I'm the new internet, I'm the new Facebook on the block, and we need a few thousand public IP addresses for our servers. So Facebook, Amazon.com, all those guys, they all have autonomous system number blocks, although they are not internet service providers, they are service providers, and they're large enough. So keep this in mind that higher tiered ISPs, the way they make their money is they charge the lower tiered ISPs. The lowest tier, tier 3 providers, charge you, the end user. They charge you one of 2 ways. They either charge you a flat rate, or they charge you in terms of bits per month, or bits per, how much total throughput that you used in a month. Now, typically tier 3 providers don't charge you that way. It's usually a flat rate. Tier 3 providers get charged by tier 2 and tier 1 providers based on their total throughput of bytes. That's how they get charged, the actual usage. It's kind of like the difference between having a cell phone plan where you're paying by the minute versus having unlimited usage. Most of your consumer commercial cell phone plans, you get unlimited usage. You also get unlimited internet, or do you? If anybody believes you get unlimited internet on your cell phone, you're wrong. You typically only get maybe 5 gigabytes total, not gigabits, but gigabytes of total download. And then once you hit that, you'll notice, and maybe it's 10, maybe it's 20, it depends on the plan that you signed up for. You'll notice that you won't get an extra charge, but your downloads will start going a lot slower towards the end of your billing cycle. So if it's day 27 of your 30 days of billing cycle, that's exactly what happens, Odd. you get throttled down. And if you didn't already know that, it's a pretty easy experiment to try. So next time you get a cell phone bill, figure out what your billing, your range of billing days is. And the next time it's 2 or 3 days before the end of that billing cycle, try downloading a big file. Doesn't matter what it is. Don't try to stream a video. Just try to literally use like an FTP program, download a big file to your phone, and or use your phone as a hotspot. Try downloading a file to your computer and watch how slow it goes. ISPs at the same level are called peers, just like on a LAN. That's the same kind of term we use for nodes that are equal to each other. Workstations are all at one layer. They're called peers. Servers that might be all at one level, those are also peers as well. Okay. So that's an example of a major inter-exchange point in Dallas, which by the way, because of this is interesting to note as well. Co-location. First of all, do you guys know what co-location means? Co-location facilities or cloud facilities. These are places where companies can co-locate their servers in cabinets many times that are right next to the inter-exchange point buildings or within the same building. Co-location in Houston, much more expensive than co-location in Dallas. It's a lot cheaper in Dallas, and it's more desirable in Dallas, and that's because that's where Dallas is like the major inter-exchange point for the entire country. It's actually Richardson, Texas, not Dallas. It's up, you guys know where Richardson, it's up like northeast of Dallas. But that's where the better colos are. Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas is also a popular inter-exchange point. What do you think makes Las Vegas a popular inter-exchange point, by the way? Not a lot of people there. Why is Las Vegas an inter-exchange point? Because believe it or not, it is more or less centralized to the United States, more so than San Francisco or whatever else that is, Oakland, I guess. That's probably the Silicon Valley area there. It's because Nevada is safer than putting your stuff in San Francisco. They don't have earthquakes. They don't have riots. They don't have $5 a gallon for gas. They don't have people spray painting statues, or maybe they do, but these co-location facilities, these inter-exchange points, are put out in the desert where there aren't anybody. It's the electricity is cheap to generate because Las Vegas's electricity is generated 30 miles south at the Hoover Dam. And also although there are not a lot of people in Vegas, there's a lot of data that goes through Vegas. That's where most of your adult entertainment sites have their information living because it's allowed there, it's legal there. All of the adult, not necessarily pornography, but all of the gambling and mutual betting and all these things that can happen. A lot of data travels back and forth through Las Vegas, through Sin City. ISP backbones. So ISP backbones typically are using, or pretty much have to use SONET service to get the speed. So most tier 1 providers are peering with each other with something like an OC768, which is 40 gigabits per second. OC3072, 160 gigabits per second. Multiple OC3072s. Wouldn't you love to have 160 gigabits per second internet connection? That's 160 times faster than your local LAN network speed. That's great. That's 80 to 100 times faster than the fastest Wi-Fi speed you could get. They obviously require the fastest links because it's carrying traffic for thousands of people's applications, not just your personal applications. Internet peak traffic by 2018 was expected to reach 1 petabit. The actual number was more like 1.8 petabits per second. You can go look up what a petabit is. Not going to ask you to know that on a test, but petabit is, we got gigabit, then terabit, gigabit, which is 1,000 terabits per second. It's not bytes, it's just amount of data traveling back and forth if you were to look into the internet tunnel at one time, at one point. Okay, I mentioned this term a couple of times. I want to make sure you guys understand what this means, a POP, or a point of presence. Not to be confused with an email protocol that nobody uses anymore called Post Office Protocol. And most of the time when you see POP written, it's a big P, a little o, big P. That's a location where an internet service provider can provide services to their customers. Like I said, Xfinity is popular in Houston because they have equipment and networks in Houston. They don't have a POP in Dallas. They chose not to. Time Warner has a POP in Dallas, or has multiple POPs all over Dallas. Xfinity has multiple POPs all over Houston. Since we're all dedicated, we're all physically connected. Your laptop might not be, but ultimately your laptop's connected to something that's physically connected to an internet service provider. You're talking to a POP. Now, the only time in which you might be talking to a point of presence that you're not physically connected to is if you are on one of two kind of wireless services. There's either satellite wireless, which uses geosynchronous Earth orbit satellites, which are 22,220 miles up, not quite directly above us. They're basically around the equator. So you could be attached that way, or you could have terrestrial broadband is what they call it, where you're actually using a cell tower or cellular service. Some of you might be using cellular right now to communicate on the Zoom meeting here because you don't have a fixed service. You don't have a fixed wired service. You have a fixed wireless, or what they call a terrestrial Wi-Fi, or excuse me, not Wi-Fi, terrestrial wireless service. Mostly that's people that are out in the country or people that don't have the luxury of having cabling. Ultimately, cabling is the best way to get stuff to you. So, point of presence. Oh, excuse me, so sorry. Some organizations use WAN technology to connect to their ISPs, common broadband technologies. DSL, you can go Google for DSL. In fact, I used to publish this. It's out there somewhere. It's called DSL, We Hardly Knew You. It came and went. WiMAX was kind of the same way. It came and went. Fiber to the home. Is anybody here lucky enough to have fiber optics to their home that they're using right now that you know of? You do. So you're pretty lucky. You must live in maybe a newer neighborhood, Franklin, or possibly you live in an older neighborhood, like certain areas of Heights. They've gone back in and they have rewired it, or certain, this is what's interesting, 5G, this new 5G wireless that's coming out, it's going in traditionally poor neighborhoods in Houston, which is interesting to me. And I looked up why, and that's because the internet service providers, Verizon and AT&T, they're actually getting kickbacks from the federal government to get internet to the inner city neighborhoods so that, we can give kids that don't traditionally have decent internet, because if you don't have good internet, it's just like not having good public school. Fiber for no extra cost. Why aren't you hopping on that, Stacy? I think I know the answer why, because AT&T sucks as a company, right? Oh, you need to schedule a technician? Well, okay, if that can happen, but just bear in mind, if you do that, recognize that AT&T customer service is horrible. They're difficult to get a hold of when compared with Xfinity, which is not much better, but they are definitely better.
Yeah.
So you can look up these three items, DSL. This is where we used the traditional telephone wires that used to come to everybody's home and everybody's place of business. Instead of using them for analog phone services, the phone company figured out, hey, we can take those wires, put them on a different piece of equipment in our central office, and then you use a special modem at your place called a DSL modem, and we can send high frequencies to you, higher that you can hear, and those get converted into ones and zeros, and in much higher frequencies, we get more ones and zeros. So DSL, very popular for a while in Houston. Came out in, again, the early to mid 90s, died off by maybe 2010. There is still some DSL. Occasionally I go into a company that's been like a company that has a warehouse in Pearland, for example. They've been around for 35 years and they still have a 12 megabit per second DSL. Fiber to the home, or FTTC, or FTTB, fiber to the curb, which is like what InTouch is in Siena, or FTTP, fiber to the building. There are several buildings in Houston in different areas, downtown, the West Chase area, the Galleria area, Greens Point, up there near HP, where the internet providers have run fiber to the multi-tenant buildings and then given the tenants within those buildings the option of having services there. Comcast runs a network to many buildings that they call, and it's not on this PowerPoint, called HFC. That stands for hybrid fiber. Oops, how did I get up there? Equals hybrid fiber cable. Sorry. HFC, and that is most multi-tenant buildings of any size, 20 tenants or more, 3 stories or more, usually have a fiber wire from Comcast. Comcast is not all about cable. They're a communication company. They'll bring a fiber line into the building, one single fiber, very thin line. The fiber is as thin as a human hair. And then they can split that out because the speeds are so fast on that fiber, they can split it out, but they only split it out into physical coax cable in the building to the individual suites. And that's because coax cable is a lot cheaper, it's a lot safer, it's a lot easier to run. If you damage coax cable, it's pretty easy to fix it. You can splice it together. Splicing fiber is very expensive, very hard to do. And usually if a fiber line gets cut, by the way, they just pull the fiber out and put brand new fiber in. It never is the same if you try to splice glass or plastic back together. Just can't be done. So HFC, WiMAX, by the way, was a really cool thing that was in Houston and a lot of other major cities. There was a company called Clear Communications came out. They were kind of like on every street corner, kind of like a Boost Mobile was on every street corner. And they were offering terrestrial wireless 10 to 20 megabits per second for a flat rate of $50 a month. This was 10, 12, 15 years ago, back when it was much more expensive to use your cell phone for that. And it was great. And there was no limit as to the amount of data per month. I had several of those modems. I used to drive around with one in my truck, and I was a rolling Wi-Fi hotspot. Sprint bought them. Everybody has heard of Sprint Communications, right? For $4 billion. Because they originally said, oh, that's cool technology. It actually used 2.5 megahertz range, not 2.4, but 2.5, which is a range nobody uses anymore. Sprint bought them for $4 billion. They had to get permission from the government. And then 3 months later, Sprint said, okay, we're done. Clear's done. They killed it. They killed that technology. Why did Sprint kill the WiMAX technology? It was better technology than the existing CDMA or GSM, which are the two prevailing cellular carrier signaling types that are used. CDMA primarily in the United States, GSM primarily in Europe and the rest of the world. Most people's cell phones do both, GSM and CDMA. You can go to different countries and put what's called a SIM card in your phone. That's a GSM network. Why did they kill WiMAX? Any idea? It was competition. So, if they say if you can't beat them, join them, or like what Rupert Murdoch does, he says if I can't beat a company at something, I'll just buy them and then do what that company's doing or get rid of them. Buy them to get rid of them. That's what Sprint did. And this is why Sprint ended up being kind of third or fourth and lost a lot of money, because they lost a lot of money and a lot of respect in the business world because of that deal. A lot of companies left Sprint because they said, you told us that you were buying this awesome technology and you were going to roll it out, and internet was going to be super cheap, but it was in competition to their CDMA network, and they're using the cell phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot, which they could charge for. Then they were charging for it. So it cut into their marketing model or their sales model, basically. So they got rid of it. I've got WiMAX modems sitting in my house here that are useless. They do have some WiMAX in other parts of the world still. But yeah, T-Mobile and Sprint have joined forces with each other. Number 3 and number 4 have joined forces, and that's only because they're both drowning. It's kind of like the reason Sears and Kmart merged, because they're both drowning in the water and they're grabbing onto each other. Let's try to hold on to each other before we finally go under. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's now, after they're finally closing the Sears in the Heights over on North Shepherd, which was open since 1949. It's where my grandfather bought his first lawnmower and his first refrigerator. Kind of sad. There's only one Sears department store left in the Houston area in Pasadena. It's kind of sad, but at the same time, it's evolution. If you suck, you need to go away. I mean, not people, we have to help people, but like if a company sucks, it needs to be survival of the fittest. They either need to innovate or change. Right. Why couldn't they innovate? Who knows? They missed the bus. JCPenney's about to go under too. I don't want to turn this into a marketing class, but lots of mistakes. I worked for Sears. That was one of my first jobs when I was 16 years old. When I went to work for them on day one, the manager of the Sears got up on a podium and was talking to the new hires. We're the largest department store in the world, and we're so powerful, and we sell everything. We sell, we have Coldwell Banker Financial Institutes, we have Sears Siding, we've got automotive, we got everything. We can be everything to everybody. And with that pompous kind of an attitude, they were ignoring a little country company that started in Beefy, Arkansas called Walmart, which is just a little, Walmart was not much more than convenience stores in the beginning. Anybody old enough to go to some of the original Walmarts? They had like 8 lines total. They weren't very big, concrete floors, kind of dingy looking. You wouldn't be caught dead in a Walmart. Maybe today you wouldn't be caught dead in a Walmart. But anyway, what did Walmart do? They were smart and they innovated. They said, what can we do? What can we automate? They used automation to a large degree, and among a lot of other things. And that's why Sears and JCPenney and Kohl's are dying. I'm not going to talk a lot about DSL because that technology has been basically far surpassed. It is more popular in other parts of the country. You'll go to some other parts of the country. Yeah, Amazon.com, again. Another reason why they're all dying is because we can't leave our homes to go shopping anyway, unless we want to die or, get COVID-19 or infect our grandparents or whatever. So we have to stay at home. Is Amazon.com better than Walmart, better than Sears or JCPenney's? No, the quality of the products can be potentially just as bad. In fact, arguably it's worse. Sometimes I get lucky and buy good stuff on Amazon, but again, they're just a reseller. They're just a catalog company selling other people's stuff. So anyway, DSL here, don't worry too much about how DSL works. Just understand that it is asymmetrical, as is cable. Oh, there's the HFC. It just wasn't on that list. But hybrid fiber cable or hybrid fiber coaxial. It actually stands for coaxial. Coaxial is the cable where the main conductor's in the middle and then the negative is on the outside. DSL, Southwestern Bell, which is now called AT&T. The AT&T of today, by the way, is not the AT&T from 100 years ago. It's actually Southwestern Bell, which was based in San Antonio. Totally different company. DSL claims that they're not a shared network, that cable is a shared network. they're all shared networks. It's just a matter of where it's shared from. DSL uses the central offices, which are 2-story buildings all around major cities that all of the telephone wires in the different cities terminate to. Whereas the HFC service is a more hierarchical situation where you have a cable coming into your neighborhood which feeds a main box at the beginning of your neighborhood, and it feeds a bunch of little sub boxes in the neighborhood. You can go probably find the MDF box, the cable box that feeds your neighborhood. It's usually a metal box at the end of the street or the beginning of your neighborhood. It's going to have a meter on it, a power meter on it, because they have to power them. But they're all shared. It's just a matter of where they're shared at. Cable uses a layer 1/layer 2 protocol suite called DOCSIS. DOCSIS comes in different flavors: DOCSIS 1, DOCSIS 2, DOCSIS 3, DOCSIS 3.1. It's actually very similar to Wi-Fi, but it's happening on the cable. DOCSIS standard supports data rates now of up to 1.3 gigabits per second, so faster than local standard Ethernet. Anybody have the gigabit Ethernet with DOCSIS 3.1 modems at home? You can get it in some areas of town, depending on what kind of deal you can get. You can get it for $150 a month. Cable modem, by the way, that term modem stands for modulator demodulator. It's not really a modulator demodulator. The reason we use that term modem is because us old people are used to using an old school acoustic coupler modem to connect to our internet providers. All it is the thing that's sitting there in your home that's providing services from the cable company to you is a protocol converter. It's converting DOCSIS to Ethernet. They don't use Ethernet on the coax. They do use Ethernet on fiber. If you get a fiber connection, it's called Metro Ethernet. But it's a protocol conversion that's going on. DOCSIS, again, has small frames. What's still used in Africa, by the way, Ali? DSL or WiMAX? Probably the modem. Yeah, that's very possible. And I know that there are still rural areas, South Dakota, Montana, places like that in the United States that are extremely rural, where they are still using dial-up modems. I used to make a bunch of money selling dial-up modems back in the old days when that was a thing. Knowing that would go away soon. I've still got some old equipment in a warehouse that I used to sell for $10,000 a piece, and now it's worthless. It's just needs to be thrown in the dumpster. Need to take it to CD scrap metal and get some money for it. Get some $2 bills for it. Anyway, this is maybe a map of what a cable modem service would look like. Now, most of you don't have a cable modem. Most of you have a gateway. In fact, if the thing that the Comcast puts at your place of business is they usually have a business internet gateway or BIG or BSG on it. Some of you can go out and buy your own cable modem, and I recommend this because unlike AT&T, Xfinity charges you $12-15 a month to rent that gateway. There's another reason why you don't want Comcast's gateway is because, or when I say Comcast, I mean Xfinity. They're actually using that device to provide free Wi-Fi to other people in your neighborhood. They're using it to carry cellular service. Comcast and Xfinity have cellular service, but they're using your internet connection. The speed that they're not cutting into your speed, but they're using your electricity and your housing to house their infrastructure. Don't let them trick you into that. They'll try to say, oh, well, we're not going to support you if you use, somebody else's modem. No, you can go down to Walmart and do yourself a favor and buy a $40 or $50 TP-Link or Netgear, or you can go Google for these, a modem, and save the $15 a month. It'll pay for itself within 4 months, and then use your own router. Go get a good ASUS or D-Link or TP-Link router that you have full control over. You don't have any control over that business gateway or that home gateway they put in your home. So some of you might have a network that looks like this. You might have, anybody still have actual cable TV? Hopefully you don't. Nobody better be paying for cable TV in here. Everybody better have Sling or Netflix or Disney, because again, that's or IPTV. Yeah, everybody better have something else, because the traditional methods of delivering entertainment services and communication services has changed drastically. The DirecTV and Dish Network are losing millions of dollars per month. The only way that they still exist is they are using their satellites to provide internet connections to other carriers. So DirecTV and Dish are tier 1 providers for internet services. Yes, they'd love for you to buy television subscriptions from them, but they know that's going to go away eventually. Anybody watch TV over the air, OTA, by the way? You ever heard that term, OTA? That stands for over the air. There's a thing that I see sometimes on late night television. How are we doing on time, by the way? Oh, we're almost out of time. Let me go ahead and stop here. Go look up that term, though, over the air. There is still broadcast television in most countries, and that's because it is a mandate in our federal laws that says that the federal government has an obligation to provide communication services to the people. So we still have over-the-air broadcasts, and you can buy a little $10 rabbit ears antenna, stick it on your TV if you have a real TV, and watch digital television, better quality than the cable, better quality than the internet stuff, because it's broadcast from those big antennas out there in Missouri City, Texas, 4 miles away from where I am. A lot of the TV that you watch on it is old reruns of stuff that people don't watch anymore. You know, sitcom Friends and Magnum PI and old shows like that. Anyway, let me go ahead and stop there. Go ahead and look up those terms I mentioned, or the terms that are in the notes here, and we'll pick this up tomorrow. There's a lot more to the internet, but this is the first part of beginning to talk about network security, because the internet is a very open / very dangerous place. When am I going to post exam 2? Probably make that by no later than tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, and give you through Sunday evening at midnight to take it. Okay, so I'll make sure to get everybody's subnet assignment graded long before the final time it is to take the test. That way, you know if you're going to do well on the test or not, based on how you did on the subnet assignment. Okay, so I'll see you guys all on tomorrow.
Good question.
I believe, yes, you can resubmit, Ali. If it's a bad grade, if it's like a 50%, if it's like a 92, 93, you can resubmit, but probably won't change the grade on that, because that's a fairly good grade. But yeah, if you really made some egregious, horrible errors on it, I will want you to resubmit. I don't want to give people bad grades. I want you guys I want everybody to make an A. I want everybody to learn this stuff. Okay, and right now the thing that's holding some of you back is me being able to grade a lot of this stuff fast enough. It's really difficult for me in the summertime, just as it is for a lot of you in the summer, to take this class. And then also coupled with the COVID-19 thing, it's making it really difficult to keep up with all of the assignments. So I'll talk about the Wireshark in tomorrow's class, and I'm going to give you a better Wireshark tutorial style assignment that'll give you a better idea and a better reason to use Wireshark. It's a very powerful tool to help you troubleshoot whether you got security issues on your network. That's what it's for.
Sir, quick question. A little networking history assignment, was that optional, or was that?
Well, that was really useful for exam 1. You should still go look at those videos and go look at that information, because it's it gives you good historical background, but it's not, if you don't have a lot of bandwidth right now, don't worry about that for right now.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, it's because there was.
Usually get it done before July 3rd, which I believe is our last day of class.
Okay.
Don't worry about it for right now, okay?
All right, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing now and stop the video. I'll post this a little bit later. And see you guys tomorrow. I'll try to get online by 2.